I'm a passionate skateboarder since I'm 11 years old, and in this video I want to tell you a story about how skateboarding actually made me a better musician and how we can always learn and transfer knowledge and insights from different fields. When I was a kid, I was fascinated by skaters because they seemingly could defy gravity. They were able to do magic because they could fly. And then I was able to do those tricks myself. And then I was captivated by the dedication of skaters, which I then discovered on myself. And now skateboarding to me is just a very interesting field to observe what humans are capable of. Because skaters are overcoming mental barriers, overcoming fear, and physically they're jumping for very long distances only to land on a very small, well-calculated spot, and this is just fascinating. And as a kid I was so passionate about this sport. I was eating and breathing skating. I had all the magazines, all the videos, constantly thinking about skating, and this was a very interesting time because I got to know myself. Through skateboarding I learned how I approach things. And over the years I gathered a very interesting insight, and that's skaters are the perfect practicers. There was a specific incident which brought me to this realization. I was practicing a very simple trick and I was frustrated that I couldn't do it. And then I said to myself, just try to use the same methods you would use or recommend on your instrument. So I analyzed and realized that two things were missing. First, I wasn't committing to the trick. I didn't try to do it, I tried to try it. I was just jumping and hoping. And the second thing was, I didn't actually have a mental image of me doing the trick. So I didn't have a goal to strive towards. So I tried to solve those two problems. So at first I made a mental image of what it would look like if I did the trick. What it would look like, what it would feel like, what it would sound like. And I had a very vivid image. I could actually feel me doing the trick, so I felt I was able to do the trick. And then I committed to it. I didn't try, I did it. And I actually did it first try. And to test if this was just luck, I tried it again. No, I did it again the second time immediately after that. But even if I didn't stomp the trick, because of the direct feedback you get from skateboarding, you immediately know if you did the trick or you didn't. And my commitment and this mental blueprint, I would have known exactly what was missing. And then of course be able to fill in the gap. Now I was seeing clearly what I was aiming at. And because I was committing to the trick, I had a real and realistic comparison between what I was doing and what I was trying to do. So there were two things that happened. The first one is mental learning. We know that when we have a detailed image in our head of doing a certain movement, the same areas in our brain and body are active as they would be if we actually did the movement. The same thing occurs when we closely watch someone do a movement. So my body was able to rest for a few minutes and recuperate while my brain was still learning. And then I was in the perfect position physically and mentally to do the trick. So this probably was a big part of this. But an even bigger part was that I committed to the trick. But the biggest part was that I had a goal to strive towards. If you have a mental blueprint of what you are trying to achieve, only then you can see the gap between what is and what should be. And then you can fill this gap. You can't hit a bullseye if you don't have a target. So this was one of the most important insights of my whole life. And then I said to myself, whenever I try to learn something, I always want to make sure I already start with the end in mind. I have a clear image of what I want to achieve. What you can imagine, you can achieve. And interestingly, the more vivid you imagine it, the more detailed, the higher the possibility of you actually achieving it. Because subconsciously, everything we do will always shift in the direction of our imagination. So the barrier is often just in our mind. The perfect example is when you land a skateboard trick, even after many, many tries, right after that, the possibility is much higher that you will stomp it again because you have proven to yourself that you are able to do it. That can also be done by another person. That happens all the time in skateboarding. Someone lands a trick and then everybody suddenly is able to do this. Rodney Mullen talks about this in his TED Talk. And a very famous example is also the 4-minute mile. It was deemed impossible for a human to run a mile in under 4 minutes until Roger Bannister did it. And then up until now, there are 1,400 people who did it. And now Eliud Kipchoge ran the marathon in below 2 hours. I think it won't take too long until someone else will also be able to do this. And skaters are great in always pushing the limits. And this has several reasons. For starters, skating has a very big culture of support and of progression. Even in contests, the skaters are cheering for the others if they do a great trick. And also, because of this direct feedback you get from skateboarding, the process of progression in skateboarding is very satisfying because you see your own accomplishments, your own progression right before your eyes. And this is why skaters sometimes work for months on a video part, which in the end is only 5 minutes long. But after all, the video is just the artwork, not the art itself, because the art is what the artist does. He or she practices his or her art form. I believe you need the artwork just as a reason to execute this process of improvement, of reaching for a goal. You should enjoy the process and look for insights and enlightenment even in the process. A good example is Andi Goldsworthy, who does very elusive artworks in nature out of ice or leaves, and in the end he takes a picture. By the time he gets home with the picture, the artwork might already be gone. He has just the photo. And this is kind of a symbol for the process which has taken place. He says that himself, that he tries to look for insights and try to learn about himself and the world in the process of making this artwork. And this process is what inspires people. This is why you don't want a first try in the recording studio or on the skateboard, because that will mean that the trick is easy. You want a trick, you need at least a few tries to get, because then you have grown, and that's what inspires people. I mean, what is more elusive than music? What is more ephemeral than a skateboard trick? It's just a series of movements. You can't put your finger on a skateboard trick. You cannot grab music. You need the album or the video part only as a representation, as a symbol, only as a documentation to prove that this process has taken place. You need the video part or the recording only for the audience, but the artist should distance himself or herself from the artwork, in my view. And there are actually some albums I have recorded I myself never listened to, because in my mind I already am focusing on the next project, the next hurdle I want to overcome, and the next video I want to make. And by the way, if you want to help me make more and better videos, please check out my Patreon page. There you can support my work, get something from me in return, and help that all my videos become and stay free of advertisement. What I want to say is this. This approach on progressing, on learning, on always striving for the next challenge is deeply rooted in the culture of skateboarding. And that's why I think skaters are the perfect practicers. First of all, because there is this culture of progression and support. And I believe skating brings with it the right mindset for learning, because most skaters are constantly looking for new challenges. These challenges are very clearly defined, so you have very clear criteria how the trick should be and when a trick counts as accomplished or achieved. Also, you quickly realize if a trick is actionable for you, if you can do it, and this way you keep yourself in the balance between too easy and too hard, and that's exactly where flow occurs. And there are just a few outside factors which determine if you are able to do the trick. It usually depends only on you, and this gives a feeling of self-efficacy, which is very important to keep you motivated. Of course, skateboarding can be very dangerous, but the good thing about this is a dangerous situation automatically makes you very focused. So skateboarders usually have a very high level of concentration. It's actually their default position. And as I said, skating gives you a very direct and clear feedback it hurts or it doesn't hurt. You land on the skateboard or you land on the ground. And because skaters constantly set themselves new challenges and try to overcome obstacles, literally and figuratively, fear, inner resistance, exhaustion, skaters are very good at leaving the comfort zone, which is very important in learning. Actually, skaters make it a habit of leaving the comfort zone. And everything I just described together is actually the perfect definition of learning, or better yet, of deliberate practice or deep practice. If you want to watch this process, I highly recommend that you watch some videos where you can see all the attempts up to the final trick. Or watch the videos of Johnny Geiger, who chooses one trick for one video and then shows you the whole process and every step in between. And by the way, he's actually a musician. If you want to see the same process from a drummer's point of view, then you can watch Study the Greats by Austin Burkham on YouTube, who does the same thing but just in music. And this shows us that those principles of learning are general principles. They apply in every field. And that's why I was able to transfer some of my insights in skateboarding to my instrument. And I now practice much more deliberately and much better than before. Because I realized that I don't have the direct feedback like in skateboarding on my instrument. Because especially on the drums, you don't have wrong notes. You can't play a wrong chord where your ear immediately tells you that it's wrong. So when I practice something, I make sure that I have very specific criteria, maybe even quantified, like for example a very specific tempo in BPM. Or I play a song with a sheet music and I want to play every note exactly like it's written on the page. Of course, there are more methods on how to get a direct feedback. You can, for example, use a mirror, so you have an immediate visual feedback. And if you want to implement this culture of support and progression, you can maybe find a practice buddy, so a friend or a colleague who learns the same skill as you, same language, same instrument, whatever. And you can share videos, you can exchange tips and tricks, but most of all, you can celebrate each other's accomplishments. This is a great motivation. You can also look to join a band which has this kind of culture, or you can try to implement this culture in your current band. As I said, skating can be dangerous and thus makes you focus automatically, but practicing an instrument is usually not that dangerous. So here we need to implement some artificial methods to keep our concentration level high. You can use, for example, power posing, where you look as if you are very focused, look like this on the sheet music, for example, and your mind follows your body's posture, power posing. For example, I use focus meditation. I do focus meditation every morning, sometimes even right before practicing. And when I go here to my studio, I usually leave my phone at home, so that there are no distractions. Let me tell you that it's a great feeling, it's a great relief, and I'm much more focused. As I said, it's necessary to leave the comfort zone. Learning a new skill is always exhausting, but it's only exhausting if you have to start over and over again. The great thing is, if you make it a habit, you don't have this inner resistance. So my biggest tip is practice every day, just for a minute. That already counts. But you don't have to start a new habit over and over again. If it's established as a habit once, you can just increase or decrease the time, the duration per day. And this way you have the least amount of inner resistance and you can just scale up or down, but you make it a habit of leaving the comfort zone and learning every day. And the most important thing I learned is always have a mental blueprint. Always have a clear picture of what you will be able to do. Only then you can see the gap. Only then you can see the distance you still have to go. So when I try to learn something new, I paint a large frame and then I see what I still have to fill in, and I can fill it in with reality. And that's what it feels like. If you make a plan, you already know what will happen. And then the plan becomes reality. And that's such a great feeling, and you will accomplish much more with this method. Of course, you don't need skateboarding to have insights like that. You can learn a lot from other fields or from other sports which have the same properties as skateboarding, like for example acrobatics or martial arts or snowboarding. Snowboarding taught me another very valuable lesson, and that's it's a lot of fun to set goals, be happy if you achieve them, and then use the newfound skills creatively. Me and my siblings, we have always made a game or a challenge out of everything. And this way we have always learned something. And in snowboarding, I sometimes challenge myself to ride a whole day on my weakest side with the left foot in front. That's a very big challenge because it's not that intuitive and you feel like a beginner again. But that's a great position to be in because that's a great way to learn new things. And I realized that I learned a lot of new problem-solving strategies. Because that's basically all you do. You go up the mountain and you solve the problem of how you come down. And of course you can do this with very basic technique or with very sophisticated technique. And if you improve your technique, you can do more things. You can go down the mountain in many different ways. And that's pretty similar to what I do on the drum set, because I don't play this way. I play open-handed, which means I lead with my left hand on the left side and I lead with my right hand on the right side. That actually means that I have to do twice the work, but that also means that I learn more and that I have more problem-solving strategies. And also, there are a lot of things happening in your brain called bilateral training. I mentioned this earlier in another video. And so if you lead with your weaker foot, you also train your stronger foot. So training those things you cannot do will also improve the things you can do already. And I find this so fascinating. That's why I always try to work on my weaknesses, because I know that this will improve the whole system, the whole thing, everything I do. On the instrument, you can get an idea across in many different ways. And the more technique and the more structure and the more concepts you know and you have, the more sophisticated your playing will be, and also you will enjoy it even more. And this is why I challenge myself all the time. Of course, ideas always trump skills or technique, but you need at least a certain amount of those so you are able to translate the ideas you have in your head using your instrument. So the bottom line is this: you can learn from all kinds of different fields and you can transfer insights between different areas. But there's one thing you need in order to do this. You need to reflect. Always reflect on what you do. Always look for the bits and pieces. Look for the gears which are working when you are doing something. And then you might just see some general patterns which apply in other areas as well. That's why I like to watch TED Talks. There, people who have learned a lot, done a lot, and reflected a lot are telling stories about their insights. And those insights are usually pretty general observations, which people can then apply to their certain fields. And just like that, the TED Talk of the skater Rodney Mullen not only makes me a better skateboarder, but also a better musician. And I see the TED Talk of the drummer Jojo Mayer not as a drum instructional video, but in a certain way also as life advice. And I like to watch creative performances from all kinds of different fields. And in the end, they make me a better drummer because they inspire me as a human being. They make me more creative. So for example, in my eyes, the drummer Scott Pilgrim and the skater Richie Jackson are kind of the same thing. In my eyes, they even have the same style of approaching their instrument, their sport. Both are very creative, think way outside the box and incorporate other unusual things into their field. And those are general things to do, general properties, which you can actually learn. And both make me more creative generally, and it doesn't matter where I use this newfound creativity and inspiration. But that's not a new insight. I think you know this already. You probably learned something from a totally different field and incorporated it into your respective area of expertise. And please tell me about it. It would be amazing to read your experiences of transfer from one field to another. Please write it in the comments. And just like that, in everything I do, there's always a little bit of skateboarding. So if you see me play on stage, you see, in part, a skateboarder who may sometimes seem absent-minded and grim even, but who enjoys this process of trying to reach for the best possible performance, and who loves showing you these tricks, which, because they are so elusive, in that moment matter the world to me. And what also matters a lot to me is making these videos for you. So if you want to see more videos on learning, music, and of course the drums, then please hit subscribe. I will see you in the next video, and now go skate.